Hi, this is Disney animator Doug Bennett, and you are listening to the Skull Rock Podcast.
Skull Rock Podcast is brought to you by the generosity of the following companies. Shure, sound extraordinary. To podcasters, recording musicians, and streamers who are looking for studio quality audio at home or on the road, the Shure MV7 Podcast Kit is a premium all-in-one solution inspired by the legendary Shure SM7B and is designed to address the versatility required by modern creators. For more on the Shure MV7 Podcast Kit, visit shure.com, SHURE.com, or click the link in our show notes. Shure, sound extraordinary. And by The Old Mill Press, publishing beautifully crafted books that illuminate our world. To learn more, visit theoldmillpress.com. And by listeners like you.
Aye, mateys, remember this as the day you sailed with the Skull Rock Podcast. Proceed at your own risk and mark well me words, mateys. Dead men tell no tale.
Welcome into Skull Rock Podcast, the show about all things Disney and pop culture. Every week we take you behind the scenes of some of your favorite Disney films, theme park attractions, performances, books, music, as well as what's streaming, what's in theaters, and what's happening in this universe of entertainment. I'm Aljon Go. I'm a musician and long-time fan of Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, and pop culture. And you can email me, Aljon, ALJON, at skullrockpodcast.com.
And I'm Dave Bossert, artist, filmmaker, Disney historian, author, world traveler, and anything else you want to tack on to me. Welcome to the Skull Rock Podcast. If you love Disney and pop culture, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also like and follow us on Facebook, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, LinkedIn, and on the Skull Rock YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You can also email me at dave@skullrockpodcast.com. Aljon,
yes.
I know that you're enjoying your time at this point down in Walt Disney World because these are pre-recorded because you're on vacation.
That's right.
And I just want our listeners to know that this is a shortened show, but you're going to hear part 2 of our interview with Kevin Lima, the director of the Goofy movie, Enchanted, and so much more. He's an incredibly talented storyteller, story artist, writer, you name it, animator,
all
character
around,
designer. Yes. I just keep going on and on. But anyway, enjoy part 2 with Kevin Lima.
Skull Rock Podcast, interview time.
Well, Aljon, we are back again for week 2 with director Kevin Lima. Kevin, welcome back to the show.
Thanks a lot. I was worried that you'd cancel.
No, we don't we absolutely would not cancel, especially on it with a guest like you.
You're very kind.
But last week I'm sorry, Aljon?
We had the key to the green room.
Really?
Did I leave with the key to the green room? I'm sorry.
So, Kevin, last week we kind of ended talking about the Rescuers Down Under and some of the things you were doing around the Rescuers Down Under.
Right.
I want to kind of pick up from there because I see, again, on IMDb, and I'm using it as a guidepost,
you're a brave man.
Rover Dangerfield.
I did.
What happened? Yeah.
So most of us did freelance while we were at Disney, right? So we picked up some extra cash in our evenings. And I think I worked on, before that I did some animation on Opposites Attract. Is that what it's called? The Scat Cat Paula Abdul video.
Yes,
I did some.
Right.
I think Chris Bailey was gathering a lot of Disney animators behind the scenes to work on.
I think didn't Bruce Smith work on that as well?
He did. Yeah. And so I did some work on that, and then I did some character design on Rover Dangerfield. It was Rover was done by Hyperion Studios that did the Brave Little Toaster.
Yeah.
So Tom Wilhite was aware of who I was, and I think also Steve Moore and Bruce Smith. We're both working on that.
Yes.
Animating on that. So I did some of that. I did some mascot design for a Korean theme park that I don't know if they ever used. I did some film character designs for a film adaptation of a video game. What was that called? It was about a caveman. Bonk. Do you remember Bonk?
Yeah.
The video game Bonk.
Bonk's Journey Adventure.
So they were thinking about doing a film with Bonk, so I did some work on that.
And this is all freelance.
It's all freelance, yeah.
So you're still working at the studio.
I'm still working my days at the studio and then going home and doing a little bit of extra work.
Yeah, and so you finish off Rescuers Down Under. What was the next project that you moved on to, and what were you doing on that project?
Beauty and the Beast.
Okay.
And I was, again, a character designer. So that was also pretty early. I did a lot of work on the objects, the 3 objects. They had done some, I think Chris Sanders had done some really beautiful phys dev work. And I took those drawings and turned them into animatable character designs.
So Mrs. Potts, Lumiere, and Cogsworth.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and all the others, right? So there was a feather duster,
yes.
and an ottoman that was a little dog, and what's his name, Chip, all those characters that were around.
Okay.
And a bunch of work on the Beast, which then Glenn took when he did his deep dive, when he came onto the movie, and yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, so that's it's pretty much what I did on that film. And then from there, I went into visual development. So
Okay.
there wasn't another movie right away.
Yeah.
Went into biz dev and worked on a lot of movies that didn't ever get produced, or shorts that never got produced.
Yeah.
But one of them was Aladdin. It was I was the very first biz dev artist to work on Aladdin. So I was given Howard Ashman's treatment, and they had written like 5 songs. He and Alan Menken had written 5 songs, and I just started designing. I just started doing visual development, character design work on that film.
I was going to just interject here
Go ahead.
and ask you, just tone-wise at the studio, because leading up to Beauty and the Beast, things were still a little, I think new management was trying to find their footing, and so the films did okay, but it really was Beauty and the Beast that was that breakout hit that sort of really kicked off the 1990s,
Right,
and it's
I think Rescuers was a bit of a disappointment, wasn't it?
Yes, Rescuers was kind of a disappointment, but Rescuers was also a transition picture because they moved from traditional cell animation and traditional
The cap
camera
system, right, to digital.
to digital with the cap
Right.
system, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but it was a bit of a disappointment. But Beauty and the Beast was this blowout hit. I mean,
Right.
can you talk a little bit about the feelings that you and your friends and just the atmosphere of the studio?
Yeah, it was a time of great excitement, right? We felt like we were really accomplishing something, that we were turning around, the ship, the big lumbering, cruiser that was the Titanic. We had to turn it around and head in a whole different direction. Well, the Titanic went down, so maybe that's not a great metaphor. Right?
You had to turn the battleship around.
We had to turn the battleship around, and it took a little bit of time, but we were all like hugely invested, and we all really had something to prove. I don't know if you felt this way, Dave, but we all felt like, we had chips on our shoulders saying, we can do this. We can make this great again, right? We can really make a name for ourselves and create the Disney that we loved when we were growing up. So that was all really important to us, and we gave it our all. Yeah. I mean, we were working endless hours, and if you had a sequence that was due in storyboards, you were working overnight sometimes to get to that next, the presentation the next day, because you just cared so deeply about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I would say I felt a sense of excitement with The Little Mermaid,
Absolutely.
and you know, when I look back at that period, I sit there and say, you know, Don Bluth and Steven Spielberg's, you know, American Tail,
Right.
and then Who Framed Roger Rabbit and The
Mhm.
Little Mermaid. Those three to me are really what ignited that renaissance of
Yeah.
animation. But it was still kind of a bumpy road until you got to Beauty and the Beast. And it felt like the studio started firing on all cylinders at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think we changed in our wants and our desires and and our want for excellence, right? We were always aiming towards that. I think we
Yeah.
just when beauty happened, we all felt like we'd gotten there,
Hmm.
right? And it was affirmed by its success in the box office,
Yeah.
right? So we really felt the success, and so did the studio, mind you, because that's when they started to double down on
Yes.
production,
Yeah.
right? Because now every film had to be better than the one before.
And for a few years it was.
Yes, yes, there was a
Yeah.
climb.
Yeah, there really
Definitely
was,
was.
you know.
Yeah,
But Beauty and the Beast did feel like, you know, everybody grabbed the brass ring at that
yeah,
point.
yeah. But we were in development and production on Aladdin, and Beauty hadn't been released yet.
Right.
So we didn't really know what it was going to do. Um, so when it did do what it ultimately achieved, we were just ecstatic. And then it put a lot of pressure on Aladdin.
Hmm.
You know, Aladdin had to be better. It had to succeed at a higher level. And we got that pressure not only from ourselves but from the studio,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. And it did. I mean, ultimately, you know, it was the next step up,
Yep. Yep.
and I think people were really, you know, overjoyed,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you
But I don't
will.
know if you remember, Dave, we threw half of the movie out
But that
at a
was
certain point.
but wasn't that typical during that period? It
Um,
seemed like a lot. Every single picture had major rewrites and sequences thrown out and songs that
Yeah,
weren't, you
I think
know,
Aladdin felt different. Aladdin
yeah,
felt like we were actually starting over.
really that much of it got thrown out.
Mermaid was pretty smooth.
Hmm.
It had some bumps along the ways, but it was pretty smooth. I don't remember the same upheaval on Rescuers. There was a struggle to make it all come together, right?
Yeah,
Because of everything that the company was taking on, the studio was taking on. But And Beauty had a false start, right? It had to
yes,
start with the Purdums,
right.
which got tossed, and so they started over. But Aladdin, and honestly, I think after the first pass, I went into storyboards on Aladdin. So I was a storyboard artist. I moved from, I just felt like, okay, what's the next challenge?
Yeah,
And I moved from character design into storyboards.
yeah,
Working under Ed Gombert, which was he's a hugely influential sort of mentor. Um, and we had done a full pass of the movie, and we put it up, and they threw most of it out. And I had done a big song. I had done "Humiliate the Boy," which I think shows up on the one of the extras on the
yes,
Blu-ray or something. Yeah,
yeah.
and I had done that, and it took months to get that, to pull that together. And it got thrown out. And I said, what am I doing? Why am I, I'm putting so much into this. Um, and I also was getting a little bit more ambitious. I had, um, I had directed a theater production.
Hmm.
I had met Kevin Traxler, who was a PA, but was heavily involved in the theater. And we became friends, and he asked me, have you ever thought about directing a piece of theater? So I directed the West Coast community theater premiere of Into the Woods. A lot of qualifiers in that one, huh? Um, but but I did that, and that gave me another level of, I forgot, like I used to direct puppet shows, right?
Yeah,
So I love being at the center of the maelstrom. So So I asked at the studio, I went in and said, I'd really like to direct. I went into Peter Schneider and they said, sorry, it isn't going to happen. We've got the next 5 years figured out.
Yeah.
And
that's part of the problem at Disney Animation sometimes, right?
Yeah, there was no room for, to climb the ladder. So I left.
And you didn't work on Lion King.
I worked during that period of visual development. I worked on a lot of projects, everything from King of the Jungle, as it was called. So I did a little bit of work on King of the Jungle when it was when it was much more of like a nature documentary, felt much more sort of realistic. And on things like, oddly, I worked on Goofy of the Apes, which is a title that has both of the movies I make in the future, Goofy and Tarzan. And developed that.
Did you do some work on Pocahontas?
I didn't.
You didn't? Okay.
No, I didn't. Yeah. I remember we did something like that it never had a title, but it was like West Side Story with cats that we were working on. The Frog Prince, a couple of other shorts. Tiny the Alligator.
Yeah.
Something they were
I actually remember that one.
About an alligator that gets flushed down the toilet.
Yeah.
Grows up in the sewers of New York.
Yeah. Was Rob Minkoff attached to that?
He was.
Yeah. I think Rob was trying to develop that, wasn't he?
And the Frog Prince also. Rob was in development while we were doing all this.
Yeah.
So I did touch a lot of those projects. I just didn't move forward into production.
So you decided to leave?
I did. I decided to look for a place where I could gain an opportunity.
Right.
So again, I asked for something. I got an answer. I got a no. So I said, okay, how do I achieve this? And Hyperion Productions was run by Tom Wilhite again, who did Brave Little Toaster and Rover Dangerfield. He was open to developing some work with me. And I trusted that he could make something happen because he had made it happen for so many others.
I have said on this show a number of times, Tom Wilhite is an unsung hero from that period of time. I mean, he gave Tim Burton his shots early on.
Yeah, gave him that short, right? Gave him that
Vincent and Frankenweenie. The live action, the original live action half hour.
Right.
Frankenweenie.
And Jerry Reese and
Tron,
I think.
I just think Tom Wilhite is somebody that really I think was a kingmaker back then.
Yeah, and I sort of recognized that, this guy is able to spot and nurture talent, and I hoped that maybe he, me going over there and working with him, that we could make something happen. And he kind of sold himself that way too, to get me to actually take the jump.
Yeah.
So I left, and I started developing movies at Hyperion. So we developed a whole bunch of movies that didn't really, nothing ever got made.
How long were you there? How long were you there before?
Maybe a year.
And then you came back to Disney.
Yeah. So we were developing a bunch of things, and Chris Buck was there, and Steve Moore was there, and I was doing like a Tom Thumb and Thumbelina movie that the guys who wrote Les Mis had written songs for. Hansel and Gretel. Matilda, before it became a live action movie, we were developing. And while I was doing that, I did some freelance in the evenings because Jerry Reese was developing the Goof Troop movie. And so I did a little bit of freelance, did a sequence for him, storyboarded Max getting ready for school in the morning, brushing each of his teeth. His tooths with a toothbrush.
Each individual tooth.
I'm just thinking of gags that he could do as he got ready for school. And Jerry decided that he wanted to keep pursuing live action. So he left. And I think it was a combination of Jerry and the executives at Disney. They had a meeting, and I got this memo. Unfortunately, one of the executives, gave me this memo, and it broke down. TV animation had a meeting with feature animation to talk about possible directors for a Goofy movie. And they went director by director. And they had some, not always nice things to say, very honest, this memo.
Wow.
And I was lucky enough to come out unscathed. It was like, we never should have let him go, was written on this memo. And I think because I had already worked on it and Jerry supported me taking over the movie and feature animation supported me, I got the gig. I got a job.
And they said, we want you to direct this movie. And when did it become the Goofy movie as opposed to the Goof Troop?
I don't remember. I think it happened slowly. I think there was always a sense that we needed to, although it was based on Goof Troop, we needed to separate the movie enough from the TV series to have it to have it live kind of on its own.
Mm-hmm.
So we just started developing the film. There was a script. There was already a script that had been written by Jim Magon, and it had a great foundation for where we needed to go. Jeffrey pushed us the entire time to make it more emotional, and we did that. You can get all this information if you actually watch Not Just a Goof, that documentary.
I watched it. I did. I want to hear it from you directly. and I also know that when we talk to people, you get more relaxed talking to Aljon and me. And
maybe I'll give a few little.
Maybe you'll tell
nuggets.
some stories that were either left out of that documentary or whatever.
I think I did a 6-hour interview for that movie. It was exhausting.
By the way, that memo you mentioned, do you still have it? Did you keep it?
I still have it.
Good. I'm glad you held on to it.
I handed all these boxes of things over to the filmmakers of Not Just a Goof, and that memo was in one of those boxes. And in the first cut of the movie, that memo was on screen. And I said, guys, no.
Yeah.
You cannot use this. You cannot. And they ended up redacting it all and just my paragraph on.
That would have been hurtful.
That would have just been
not kosher. Not kosher, as they say.
It's not kind.
No.
So, and I was given that memo after the movie came out. One of the executives found it while they were cleaning out their drawers, and they handed it to me. So it was. We made the movie very quickly, right? So it was like a 2.5-year movie, as opposed to the 4 or 5 that Disney feature animation took to make a movie.
And that was part of the problem of trying to become a director of feature animation during those years was the movies were 3-4 years and they had them all stacked out, and you might wait 10 years before you do your next movie.
Right. And then someone finishes a movie and then they get back in line.
Yeah.
Right. So all the spaces were sort of taken up on that kind of a schedule. So I really thought this was a blessing. It was my opportunity to prove that I could do it. It was hard. I'm not gonna fool you. It was very, very hard. We were making the movie on 3 continents, I think,
and a much smaller budget.
And we didn't have Zoom. We didn't have any means to have immediate interaction, right? So I was making video tapes, VHS tapes of myself, handing out the scenes. We'd put them in the mail. They'd go to France. They'd watch them. They'd have questions. We'd get on the telephone and talk about the scenes. Ultimately, I did finish storyboarding and cutting the movie in the States. And then I went over there and lived there for about a year with everyone in Paris. So that became easier at that point. And then we'd have Jeffrey meetings at 7:00 in the morning where he'd fall asleep or he's just exhausted. I get it. But yeah, it was tough. And Jeffrey was trying to prove something, right? He was trying to prove that those movies were getting really expensive over at Feature Animation, and we need to find another venue or another avenue to create cheaper product. Yeah. And this was the way he was doing it.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I would say to our listeners, if you want to get the whole behind the scenes of the Goofy movie, you need to go to Disney Plus and watch It's Not a Goof.
Not just a goof.
Excuse me, not just a goof. Excuse me, I got to get the title right. Not just a goof.
Yeah.
And you have to watch the entire credit roll to see the last scene of Kevin talking.
Most people turn it off right before the very end.
Well, you know something? I'm telling people you got to watch the entire credit roll because there is a nice little scene,
Post-credit scene, yeah.
post-credit scene of Kevin at the end answering a very important question. And we're not going to tell them what that question is, are we?
Right.
No.
Let's send some viewers over to Disney Plus. Yeah, so I really thought of the movie as a way to get my foot in the door, as a stepping stone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going to prove myself. And while we were making the movie, it became just so much more than that. You know, the piece of my childhood that we didn't really talk about is that, you know, my dad left our family when my parents got divorced. They got divorced when I was 9, and he left when I was 12. And I didn't see him again for 25 years.
Wow.
So, yeah, he was, you know, he was a heroin addict.
Oh my gosh.
And it created a whole lot of drama in my family. And I think that a Goofy movie became my way of working out that relationship. Like, what could a relationship be with your dad? What could that look like? How could there be a happily ever after, you know, in a domestic family story? You know, that didn't have to be a fairy tale in order to examine it. It could feel contemporary.
And I would sit here and say, having seen not only the Goofy movie several times over the years, but to have watched the documentary, 30 years later, it's a highly successful movie that continues to build a broad audience base. And it's
more than any of my other movies, right? This is the movie that's talked about.
And it's resonating with people. It's touching them because it's a highly personal film. And when filmmakers make a highly personal film, I think it does connect on a lot of different levels with an audience. I mean, look at The Nightmare Before Christmas. It was a very personal film for Tim Burton, and that has just taken on a life of its own because it has resonated with not only an audience but generationally.
Right.
You know?
No, you're right. I mean, one of the great things that's worked into the DNA of a Goofy movie is the fact that it's a father-son story, right? It's a parent-child story, so that everyone who saw it when they were 5, 10 in 1995 are now parents, right? So they saw the movie through Max's eyes. Now they see it through Goofy's eyes, and now they're showing it to their kids, right? They want to share it with their kids. So there's this cycle that happens with it. And also those kids, the millennials, right, that watched it then, are all in the business now, right? They're critics and they're filmmakers. And people are using a Goofy movie to tell their own stories, as a basis to tell their own stories. You know, I don't know if you saw this thing on Atlanta, the TV show Atlanta.
No, but I think you either mentioned it when we interviewed you guys about the documentary a few months ago. Yeah, I think you might have mentioned it.
Yeah,
but
so they took a movie. They took a Goofy movie and they used it as a way to talk about something bigger, something personal for them. And when I first was watching it, I was kind of pissed off. I was like, "Who the hell? What are they doing? I directed this movie." And I was kind of mad. And then when I got to the end of it, I thought, oh, this is what art does, right? It feeds another generation of artists to talk about the things that they want to talk about. And I was so incredibly honored to have a movie that I worked on, not used, but embraced in this way.
And inspired. It inspired them.
Yeah,
you know,
it inspired them.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
When you finished the Goofy movie,
what
happened? What was the next thing that
Well, Jeffrey got fired, right?
Right. Jeffrey was canned before
Yeah,
you
Jeffrey was canned before we had a release.
Right.
Our release got bumped from November to March, and Jeffrey got canned in October,
Yeah.
right? So, so our movie kind of, I don't know, went down the toilet a little bit. It got sort of swept under the rug, maybe is the correct term. So it didn't do very well. It wasn't supported very well. The marketing campaign got cut way down. So I was a little like, okay, what happens now? I don't, Jeffrey had been talking to me. While I was finishing Goofy, he handed me Tarzan of the Apes. He handed me the book and he said, this is going to be your next movie. And I read it and I absolutely fell in love, right? This was my opportunity to make the Jungle Book. And he wanted to make it in Vancouver, Canada.
I remember that.
He wanted to start a studio up there.
Yeah.
And I was saying to Jeffrey, like, how do you do this? You can't, like, we could barely animate Goofy. How are we going to animate a naked man? That's kind of impossible. It's the hardest thing you can possibly do. And you can do it, Kevin. No problem. I know you can do it. Look what you did. I'm like, okay. And I went up to Vancouver. Dan Rounds and I, the producer, of a Goofy movie, went up there and we were going to open a studio. I was going to move to Vancouver.
Wow.
And we were looking at homes. And then Jeffrey got fired. And Jeffrey tried to get me to go to DreamWorks. He really wanted me to come over and direct.
Yeah. He was working the phones for a lot of people. He was
doing the hard sell.
Yeah.
And he wanted me to direct The Prince of Egypt.
Yeah.
And I had a meeting with Steven Spielberg, in which I had already been asked by Michael Eisner. I think all the political game in this moment, right? So Michael finds out about Tarzan. He says, we're going to make Tarzan at feature animation, and we want you to be the director. And I was kind of like, wow, this is a huge opportunity. At the same time, I'm sitting with Steven Spielberg, and he's saying, like, we'd really love for you to do this. Sort of, Jeffrey really believes in you. And I was hemming and hawing and talking about Tarzan, and Steven said, well, if you don't believe in it and you want to do something else, go do something else. And Jeffrey was pissed off. He was so mad that Steven didn't cinch the deal for him. And I ended up staying at Disney.
I almost feel like that was nice of Steven to say that, because
it was so honest against Steven, right? He understood what it is to be a director and to have to put your heart and soul into something. It wasn't just business.
Yeah.
For him. Yeah. So he gave me permission. I could let Jeffrey down.
Yeah. I just want to just briefly talk about the fact that when a studio head changes out, oftentimes their projects get, the short end of it.
Yeah. What's that term? Like a new broom sweeps clean.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. And by the way, Jeffrey did that with the Black Cauldron.
Yeah.
When he came in, because the Black Cauldron wasn't supported.
Yeah.
He wanted to go in and edit it and change it. And then
I remember that,
realized there were no outtakes. And
he tried to, oddly, he tried to do the same thing on a Goofy movie. Is that we were using the Avid. We were amongst the first to use the Avid. And he just loved this machine and he wanted to sit and do it in real time with our editor, Greg Perler. And he asked for the outtakes. And I thought, I've heard this story about you, Jeffrey, with the Black Cauldron, and you didn't learn that there are no outtakes?
Wow.
Right? So this was this would have been in 94, maybe?
Yeah.
So
it's interesting, and I do want you to just mention briefly what is an Avid for our listeners, because some people might not know. It's a digital editing.
Yeah, it's a digital editing system that was in its infancy back then, and is now what everyone uses. There's very few people work on a Steambeck or a Chem any longer with film. Right. That doesn't happen. Hardly happens.
Yeah.
And if you are shooting on film, you digitize that film and you edit it on an Avid now, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah. So we were
So
at the forefront of that.
so essentially your movie got swept aside because Jeffrey was fired.
Yeah.
And
No, absolutely.
they didn't support the movie, so the movie didn't do as well initially. But like all great films, it found its groove and grew an audience because it resonated with people and became more popular over the years.
Absolutely did. I was the 30th anniversary was on April 7th,
Yeah.
and I got to celebrate that week. I went down to LA. I live in Mill Valley, just
Yeah.
north of San Francisco. So I went down for the week to celebrate, and it was overwhelming. I had to kind of just put all my like questions aside because I had all these cynical questions like, why is this happening now? Like, what is the studio getting out of this? And I had to just put it aside and just say, okay, Kev, just enjoy the moment,
Bask in it.
bask in it and let it happen. It's happening. It was interesting because I had breakfast with Dick Cook, who was once one of the bigwigs
I mean, he replaced Jeffrey.
he did. He did.
As the chairman of the Disney Studios.
And Dick said to me, Kevin, I know you can be somewhat cynical about the business, but this moment isn't happening because the studio made it happen. It's happening because the fans are making it happen, and you need to let go and enjoy this, and really enjoy it for what it is. See it for what it is. And it was great advice. And I knew I had to do it, and he was just hammering it for me. And I did. I sat back and from the moment I woke up and, turned on Disney Plus and saw, the banner that said, not just a goof, like right there, I almost fainted really. But I saw that and I clicked over to the start page and it's a giant picture of me. And I'm like, holy moly, I'm like a Disney character, plastered up on the screen. I realized, oh, this is a moment and I need to enjoy it. And I went to the studio that day and they had a 30th anniversary party on the lot for the employees. And a little cynicism came out and I said, why are you guys, I talked to one of the people that was running it. I said, why are you guys doing this? And they said, because it is loved by our millennial employees. They are asking us to do this. And it's the only big celebration we're doing this year for an anniversary.
Yeah.
And we wanted to, our job is to create enthusiasm amongst our employees. And so we're giving them what they've been asking for. So that was real nice. And then we had a party that night with Bill Farmer, the voice of Goofy, and everyone who made Not Just a Goof, and we celebrated that release. And then we had a big 30th anniversary bash at the El Capitan that sold out in 2 days, and it was wild. It was like watching the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
I mean, it was awesome, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was so wonderful. It was.
I mean, when you see a film in the El Capitan in Hollywood and it's a full house, and it's a full house of fans of the movie.
Yeah.
I mean that's something.
Yeah. Yep. It was quite wonderful. So, it's the movie that just keeps on giving and keeps growing.
Yeah.
It just keeps growing.
So I think this is a really good place for us to stop because I'd like to next week pick up on you start working on Tarzan.
I did.
Yeah, and
1995.
And I'm excited to talk to you about that. And then from there, you really start to go into live action.
Yeah, again, it's like ask for what you want.
Yeah. Well, what I think it is, you're a great example of an artist, a great talent who keeps evolving and moving along this continuum of talent and doing different things, which is I think is something that our listeners should really listen to. So with that, Kevin, I'm going to say thank you for being on the Skull Rock podcast, and we will see you next week
I'll see you then.
here. Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Oh, yes. Skull Rock Podcast is on Patreon. You can help support the show with your monthly contribution and become a friend of the show. Be part of the almighty Skull Rock Podcast crew. Much like friend of the show, Josh Volker. Or you become a producer, an awesome crew member, Steve Munch. Also, Chris Bannis, thank you so much. By supporting the show, you get to make sure that A, you get a shout out on the show, and B, support the show and get this content for free every single week. Now, I tell you, one of the coolest things about being a Patreon crew member is the fact that you get to have ad-free versions of this show. So if you do dig it and you want it, you might even put in some extra, like, behind-the-scenes stuff. We're working on that. So if you enjoy the show, awesome. Be part of the show, be part of the Patreon, and keep this show going. We do appreciate it. Thank you so much for your support and subscribing to Skull Rock Podcast.
Hello, this is Joe Haydar, animator, storyboard artist, and sometime director, and you're listening to the Skull Rock Podcast.
Your attention, please. Now loading on track number 1 for a trip around Walt Disney's Magic Kingdom.
Skull Rock Podcast.
All aboard.
Your main street to the world of Disney.
All right, part 2 in the can. Kevin Lima. And I can't believe it, Dave. Unprecedented 6 shows we have lined up total with Kevin as we talk about the films and all kinds of stuff. I just love this deep dive series we have with Kevin.
Oh, no, it's fantastic. In fact, I'm just going to say it. The month of July is Kevin Lima month. That's here right. At the Skull Rock Podcast.
Yes.
You know, I mean, honestly.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm hoping that that he gets the call to do Enchanted, another Enchanted one, because he is so great at what he does. And while, Enchanted 2 was okay, I can't wait to get that Kevin Lima magic back on the big screen. That's what I'm hoping for.
Absolutely.
Keeping my fingers crossed. Anyway, hey gang, thank you so much for checking out our show all the way till the end. You can like this show on every one of the podcast platforms. We're on it. So subscribe today, share the show. We would appreciate it. We'd also appreciate you to subscribe to our YouTube page. Yes, we've got 4 years of shows on there. It's insane. So
more than 4 years. It's
yeah.
like over 4.5 years of shows.
4.5 years of shows, gang. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would certainly appreciate it. And another thing we would appreciate is you also just leaving comments and emails. We love to read our listener emails there. It's Dave at skullrockpodcast.com or Aljon at skullrockpodcast.com. Big thanks to Sorcerer Radio at srsounds.com. We'd also like for you to check out my other podcast, Dining at Disney, with a single show every single week. It's awesome. We talk about the parks as well as our favorite food, Dining at Disney podcast. Dave?
Well, as always, you can hear me throughout the month on Sirius XM, channel 133. I'm on the Disney Hit Show, doing my Tunes Behind the Tunes. For the month of June, we're doing What a Dog, He's a Tramp from Disney's 1955 animated classic, Lady and the Tramp. So check it out, the Tunes Behind the Tunes on Sirius XM, Disney Hits, channel 133. If you want any signed copies of any of my books, you can go to theoldmillpress.com. And you can also go to davidbossert.com, where there's a lot of free content and free stuff that you can send away for. And with that, I'm going to say, Aljon, I hope you and your family are having a fantastic time at Walt Disney World. And to everyone else, go out and have a fantastic week. Be kind to one another, and we will see you back here next Monday, right here on the Skull Rock Podcast.